Hey, folks, welcome to the Watchman Newscast. As you watch this, the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics has probably already taken place. They're about 7 hours ahead of me right now in the United States, and already it is off to a very troubling start, folks. We've been telling you the past few days about this potential Olympic terror threat. Now, Israeli intelligence officials have warned that, surprise, surprise, the Iranian regime and its proxies may be plotting terror in Paris, God forbid, against Israeli athletes and Israeli visitors who have gone to Paris to watch the games. And today, right before the opening ceremony, we had an arson attack on the Paris rail system. Now, nearly 3 million people, or 1 million people, I'm sorry, were affected by these arson attacks on 3 separate train lines in Paris. We don't know who was behind it, but security officials, and there are many of them right now, unprecedented level of security and law enforcement presence in Paris right now. They are saying that these arson attacks appear to have been coordinated. And again, folks, this comes against the backdrop of repeated Israeli warnings to French officials that, hey, the Iranian regime may sense an opportunity here to strike. And folks, look no further than, obviously, there's a track record here, 1972, the Munich Olympic massacre, 11 Israeli athletes killed by terrorists there. So sadly, there is a track record at past Olympic Games. And look, the Iranian regime certainly has the intent, and they are not beyond trying something bold or daring on Western soil. Folks, let's look at the track record before you dismiss it and say no one would attack the Olympic Games. They're so heavily fortified and heavily secured. Well, I would say 2 things. Number one, expect the unexpected. Look no further than 2 weeks ago, an attempted assassination attempt against President Trump in Pennsylvania. So, number 2, the Iranian regime has, over the years, assassinated its political opponents on European soil. And even further, look, we're learning in the past few days about a potential Iranian assassination plot against President Trump. Now, we talked about this on yesterday's live stream here on the channel. If you miss any of our newscasts, you can, folks, watch them in our archives. Just go to Newscast on the homepage. But while you're there, so you don't miss anything, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we're fast approaching 1 million subscribers for such a time as this, because we're bringing a message unapologetically of biblical truth in times where good is called evil and evil is called good. We're cutting through the clutter here on the Watchman YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe. But we discussed President Trump, this assassination plot reported, hatched by the Iranian regime. Trump's response, folks, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing him, but it's pretty accurate, on his Truth social media account, he posted, "If I am assassinated, then the Iranian regime should be wiped off the map." And he said, if whoever is in charge, when such an event, God forbid, would happen, if they don't do that, that would show that basically America is led by cowards. So President Trump not mincing any words when it comes to this Iranian plot. But you may say, again, look, Iran would never try that. Folks, 3 reasons why they would try to assassinate a former president, presumably on Western soil, on American soil, and attack the Olympics by extension. But in the case of President Trump, number 1, look, revenge for the death of the terror master Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed arch terrorist. Remember, President Trump ordered the takeout of Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. Folks, he was the second most powerful man in that Iranian regime, and he was essentially irreplaceable. And the Iranian regime has been vowing threats of revenge ever since. So that's number 1 reason they would target President Trump. And by the way, by extension, members of Trump's administration. I'm talking about former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who were also on that Iranian hit list. But a second reason, and this is pretty simple, the Iranian regime fears Trump. They don't want to see him back in office. And folks, I described it yesterday on the live stream. I'll say it again today in case you missed it. If you're the Iranian regime, and by extension, Russia, China, North Korea, who would you rather see in office? An elderly, mentally and physically incapacitated man who needs a helping hand to get up the steps of Air Force One, or A man who nearly took a bullet, at least his ear did, and he got up a few seconds later, covered in blood, pumped his fist, and yelled, "Fight." Clearly, the enemies of America do not want to see Donald Trump back in office. And just look what he did in that 4-year window when it came to the Iranian regime. Number one, designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization. Number two, of course, took out Qasem Soleimani. Number three, pulled out of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Number four, recognized Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem, moved the U.S. embassy there. Number five, recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, that strategic region, and the list goes on. The Abraham Accords, brokering those peace deals between Israel and its Sunni Arab neighbors. All of these events, these policy moves by Trump, weakened the Iranian regime. So bottom line, they don't want him back in office. And the final reason would be, in terms of targeting Trump, would be right now, Iran, and by extension, the other members of that gathering storm coalition we've talked so much about here in the newscast, China, Russia, North Korea, they're emboldened right now. They smell weakness in Washington, D.C., and why wouldn't they? I just laid out the problems, obviously, with Joe Biden. And folks, I take no joy in saying that. I'm not trying to be funny. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to have the commander-in-chief of the United States essentially incapacitated. And I have no confidence to believe that he is fit for office in finishing out his term. As he said the other night, he apparently plans to do that. I have no confidence or assurance or reassurance from him that he's up to the task and he'll be able to finish the job, see this through until January 2025, 6 months from now, when a new president is inaugurated. And again, the enemies of the free world see that. And by the way, Kamala Harris doesn't exactly strike fear in the hearts of the Iranian regime either. She supported that disastrous Iran nuclear deal when she was a senator in 2015. Speaking of Kamala Harris, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, obviously, folks, in the United States all this week, gave that stirring speech before Congress on Wednesday. Now, yesterday, he met with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. More on that in a second. By the time you watch this, he's already meeting today, Friday, July 26th, with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. So we'll see what comes out of that meeting. But in terms of yesterday's meeting with Biden and Harris, no surprise, they turned up the heat and put on the pressure in terms of demanding an immediate ceasefire. And Kamala Harris went even further than that. Take a look.
It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination.
Folks, two things here. Number one, Kamala Harris is demanding Israel, quote, end the war. Well, I think Israel, a sovereign nation, and Israel's leaders know what's best in terms of defending their citizens, in crushing Hamas, and responding to the October 7th massacre. Again, Israel won't be dictated to or lectured to by Kamala Harris. That's number one. And number two, and Israeli leaders said this, in the wake of these comments by Harris, it only emboldens Hamas to keep up the fight. Look, if Hamas sees daylight between the United States and Israel, Hamas says, you know what, we're not going to agree to a ceasefire now. We'll get everything we can, every possible concession out of Israel until we finally agree to lay down our arms. And laying down our arms, I say that, folks, with some reservation. Clearly, Hamas is the type of organization, a genocidal, suicidal organization that's going to fight to the death. So those comments by Harris are dangerous. And again, Israeli officials said as much, in that it gives off that impression that Israel and America are not on the same page. And that's why it's so important that Bibi and Trump are meeting today. Look, Trump may very well be inaugurated in January 2025 as the U.S. president once again, and I presume Netanyahu will still be in office. They're going to need to work closely together. There have been some tension there in the relationship since the 2020 election, but for them to come together today, I think is the right vision for the world to see that, look, the U.S. and Israel, the daylight could be over soon, and they're lockstep once again. And if there's a new sheriff in town here in Washington, that puts America's enemies and Israel's enemies on notice. There's a reason that during President Trump's term, there were no major wars, because America's enemies, and again, the enemies of the free world writ large, including Israel, saw what he was all about, and they didn't know what to make of him, and that was a good thing. The unpredictability was a good thing in that it kept the enemies of America on edge. Hey, folks, a tumultuous time right now, things heating up to the north. One thing to watch here as we go. After that, I've been saying over the past few weeks, in the wake of Bibi's speech before Congress, watch what happens in the north. We've been watching Gaza, of course, in the south, but that great northern war we've talked so much about, I believe it has prophetic implications. Now that he gave the address in Washington, he's heading back to Israel. Now I believe Israel in the coming weeks and months will refocus its energies on the north and dealing decisively once and for all with that Hezbollah threat. Fasten your seatbelts, keep it all in prayer. Hey, if anything happens over the weekend, we will come to you here on the channel. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.